Is everyone here involved in imaging in clinical trials? Yes? Good. So the problems I'm going to talk about will probably be very familiar to you in terms of the challenges of imaging at all the different levels of stakeholders, from sites to sponsors to imaging CROs. And I'm going to talk about how Yunu has addressed the challenges of imaging for all the different groups of stakeholders in a cloud-hosted platform that's configurable for all the different use cases as an end-to-end solution, and how we've integrated with Florence to streamline the process for sites to manage their imaging assessments and integrate those into their patient e-binders. So talk about how we've improved the efficiency for sites, for their operations, how we've addressed the compliance issues and the reliability for site reads. So I'm Gordon Harris. I'm co-founder and chief science officer with Yunu, and I'm also at Mass General Hospital and the Dana-Farber Harvard Cancer Center, where I'm co-director of the Tumor Imaging Metrics Core, where we manage a large number of imaging trials for site reads, for our site and for other sites. So I know the pain points as a end user, and as well as knowing the challenges and issues in creating a platform to help address those challenges. So what makes clinical trials imaging so difficult? There are many different aspects to clinical trials, but imaging presents specific challenges involving having a site receiving a large number of protocols that are all different in terms of what has to be done for the imaging. You have, just in oncology alone, you have over 30 main criteria, and every trial can have different modifications. It can even have multiple criteria. And so you have study staff receiving these stacks of protocols and trying to get radiology at their sites to do the imaging assessments. And radiology gets asked in the course of their busy clinical practice to do these imaging assessments, but they're not really given the information in terms of what the specifics of the criteria are. They don't have the tools to do the assessments according to the research criteria typically. They're trying to do their imaging assessments on their PACS system, which is designed for clinical reporting, qualitative reporting, not the very detailed structure reports required for making decisions and determinations about patient enrollment and treatment on clinical trials for research. And so you have all these back and forth between the study staff and the radiologists, and they're trying to figure out what has to be done, and they're getting the results, and they have the patients coming in for the office visit, and they don't have the results yet. Sites often have very delayed turnaround times in getting their imaging assessments. And so then the oncologists are trying to make the assessments themselves, but they don't have the training to do it. And they're also treating the patient, so they want to keep the patient on the trial, so you have bias issues. And then you have people who are, trying to communicate the results, but then somebody's out of office and they have to try and find somebody else. And it's just a complete chaos at most sites that are trying to do imaging assessments for clinical trials. Is this familiar to anybody here? Anybody have challenges with imaging, clinical trials, imaging assessments? See a few proud hands going up. So it's not the radiologist's fault. They're not provided the tools. They don't have the expertise and training and all the different criteria. And then you get audited and it's a mess, and you have to explain to the auditor where you got these measurements that are just numbers in a spreadsheet, and you can't even tie them back to anything on the images to know how they were created. And you don't even know if they're the same lesions being measured at different time points by different readers. So it's really a very disconnected manual process at most sites. And the problem is very large. In oncology, for example, 90% of all trials require quantitative imaging endpoints for those trials. And as Catherine was mentioning earlier, access to clinical trials is very limited. 80% of patients get treated at sites that only enroll 3% of their patients in clinical trials. So as Catherine was mentioning this morning, most patients don't have access to participate in clinical trials, even though 50% of patients say that they would love to participate in clinical trials. And pharma companies are struggling to find patients for those trials. We also find a 25 to 50% error rate at site reads. And this is not surprising if you understand all the difficulties of what I was just describing. So the fact that they get it right half the time is really what's amazing. It's sort of what Dr. Califf was talking about earlier today, about all the sites are just doing it however they do it, and it's like a free-range chicken farm. Everybody's just doing things their own way, and there's no way to standardize and harmonize without a platform that can work across sites and mandate compliance. Another challenge coming down the road is the ICH E6R3, which is adding requirements for traceability for imaging all the way down to the point of care. So audits can require traceability for the data in the system, going back to the original DICOM. Most places are not able to comply with that. Also, real-time oversight and protocol adherence at the point of capture. And so this requirement to have traceability all through the ecosystem, sponsors down to sites, down to patients, is making a lot of people very nervous. So sites and sponsors both need transparent and traceable data and want direct integration with the patient electronic data forms and reduce manual effort, manual transcription, and real-time sponsor monitoring. And where Yunu fits into this process is, Yunu is actually, I came to the Research Revolution for the first time 3 years ago and heard the discussion about what Florence does in the original, the keynote video. And I said to the person next to me, this is just like what we do for imaging, but they do for all the other data in clinical trials. So it's a way that we need to take the challenges of imaging and turn it into a strength for sites, and also make it transparent and traceable for pharma, for the sponsors of the trials, and for the imaging CROs who are in the intermediary stage to be able to have the same platform that can work across all the different stakeholders. So Yunu streamlines all the imaging measurements and workflow. We can do study starts in 30 minutes. It typically takes 3 to 6 months for imaging studies to do starts, to set up the protocols in systems. Ours is just a configuration at the user level. We eliminate errors, delays, and costs. We have guardrails to make sure everything is done correctly and compliantly. And we have a connected network of resources. A lot of sites don't have radiologists on site who are trained or who have the time or bandwidth or interest in doing clinical trials imaging assessments. And we have a network that we call the Universe, Y-U-N-U-verse, where we have reader groups across the country and sites around the country who can work with each other and collaborate and support one another as needed. So for example, the Massey Cancer Center at VCU, we have been working with them for 10 years. Their radiologists were not interested or available to do the imaging assessments, and the Cancer Center has been sending us at MGH, at the Dana-Farber Harvard Cancer Center, all their imaging assessments to do for the last 10 years through the Yunu platform. Likewise, at MGH, when we were short-staffed last summer, a year ago, we had 3 of our staff out on maternity or medical leave. We had image analysts from the University of Washington in Seattle doing some of our preliminary assessments. And when the University of Washington is short-staffed on radiologists because they're out at conferences or vacation, our radiologists overread for them. So it's a very flexible system where radiologists can be on-site, they can be off-site, or it can be a hybrid, it can be backup. It's a way for people to collaborate and work in a transparent and harmonized way. So it was built out of necessity. We built it at our site initially because we were a multi-site cancer center that had different hospitals and different PAC systems and different radiology groups, where investigators at the Dana-Farber Harvard Cancer Center hospitals could enroll patients at any of the sites, but they couldn't get their imaging assessments. So we had refined the platform, and sites started coming to us and asking if they could use it. We started licensing it out to other sites, and then we've really optimized it over the last few years after we brought it out into commercial entity Yunu, refined it for all the stakeholders, for sponsors and CROs. So now we have clients that are directly working with sponsors. We work directly with imaging CROs and core labs. For example, one of the groups here, WCG, a partner of Florence, uses Yunu in their imaging CRO. And the ACR Imaging Core Lab uses it for their industry-sponsored trials. So we have, range from the entire ecosystem, and it's just one product that's just configurable depending on how you set up a trial and how you set up the users. So it's one platform that's an imaging source of truth that can help centralize coordination, automate protocol guidance, have instant management of all the workflow, and it lets a site manage all of their trials at a site, or it lets a trial level manage all the sites in the trial with a standardized and harmonized workflow with full traceability and transparency. So there really isn't any other platform that is able to do all of that. And as I said, it creates a connectedness where sites across a network can work together, where sites can collaborate in multi-site trials for IIT trials, for example, where pharma companies, for example, early phase pharma companies often have a trial that's going to make or break their company, and